Now, leaked documents have revealed that the British Army wants to, I'm checking my notes here, relax security checks when we've got war going on in Europe for recruits from overseas to boost diversity and inclusion. I'm not making this up. The armed forces have consistently failed to hit recruitment targets and are looking overseas to boost ethnic minority representation. The leaked document outlines a series of actions to boost representation and describes security clearance vetting as being the primary barrier to non-UK personnel gaining a commission in the army. OK, so joining me now is Defence Editor of The Telegraph, Con Coughlin. Con, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining me on this wonderful Sunday afternoon. Con, what do you make of the story?
Well, I mean, first of all, I find it very credible, given the way the government is treating our armed forces. We've had a series of scandals recently on the diversity issue. I think the first thing the new head of the Air Force had to do when he took up his post last year was apologise for the discriminatory policies that had been applied against white trainee pilots. So, I mean, this goes back a long way. But, you know, I think the government is in a terrible mess with our military. We do have a recruitment problem with all three services, as you've reported on GB News. So they're desperate to try and sort of get the numbers up, but this is not the way to go about it. The way to go about it is to get a proper recruitment process in place that gets the best recruits for these services to make them a credible fighting force and not to play around with these woke issues.
I mean, there are no figures about how much this latest recruitment drive is costing, Con. But it's the title, the British Army's Race Action Plan, right? OK. Now, I'm sure most people watching and listening today actually just want people who can do the job, regardless of their skin colour, their religion, their sex, their sexuality. Can they do the job to protect the country when we've been warned that we could, in theory, be 3 years away from a war with Russia?
Well, Dawn, as you can imagine, I've spent a lot of time with the military over the years, you know, in combat zones and elsewhere. And it's a very diverse, multi-ethnic organisation. I mean, set aside the fact we've got whole regiments like the Gurkhas that operate within the British Army. But if you go on operations with the Army or the Air Force or the Navy, they are diverse. They are multi-ethnic. There's a fair number of women now in senior roles. I don't know what more you need, but this smacks to say of a recruitment crisis, because the government, in its wisdom, has outsourced recruitment. It used to be done by the three services. Now we've got other bodies in charge of recruitment. They're failing miserably to meet their targets. And so I imagine the answer they come up with is, well, let's just lower the whole vetting process and just pick up anyone we can. Well, as you say, it's not good enough. You know, the threat environment is now greater than it's ever been in my lifetime. I mean, we've got some serious problems. We need a fighting fit military, and we need to get the best people into its ranks.
Con, why can't they see that? Why can't the government see this, right? OK, for only 5 are recruited for every 8 who leave the armed forces at the moment. And for the MOD to be fiddling around with stuff like this, when really, as you say, just get a recruitment poster out there, get the right people in the job. And as for lowering security vetting, when we're on the verge of potentially, as I said, war in Europe, we've got the situation in the Middle East going on, and we've got scumbags like Abdul Zidi wandering around the country despite being a convicted sex attacker. Surely we need more security checks, but the right people doing the job.
Well, you're quite right, Dawn. I mean, and I don't know what the government's up to, but I mean, in the 14 years that the Conservatives have been in power, and remember, I write for a Conservative supported newspaper, and I spent the last 14 years criticising successive defence secretaries and the government for the way it's treated the military, running down its numbers, running down its equipment programmes, and all these issues are now coming home to roost. And, you know, not only do we not have the kit, but we don't have the men and women to serve our country. And I don't know what they're playing at. And you get these platitudes from, the defence secretaries. I've forgotten how many I've dealt with now, but Grant Shapps is the latest one saying it's all fine and tickety-boo and we've got money. Well, this is nonsense. And we just need to wake up. And the other thing I would say quickly, and something your viewers might want to ask the Prime Minister when he does this town hall with you, he doesn't seem very interested in abroad. He doesn't seem very interested in defence. They run to Ukraine and make platitudes. But when it comes to providing the money and resources to give us that fighting edge, I don't see it myself.
Interesting point to end on. That's Colin Coughlin. Very much for joining us this afternoon, a defence editor of The Telegraph. Thank you very much. Now, let's see what my panel make of this. I'm joined today by political commentator Emma Webb and broadcaster and journalist Claire Muldoon. And the observant amongst you might spot, we're all female. We identify as female today, ladies? Yes, we are. And we're all wearing green. Varying shades of. And I've even got a green highlighter, which is frankly pathetic. Right, Army Green. Obviously, it's Army Green. Kind of. But there's a seamless link there. What do we... I'm going to come to you first on this one, Emma. What do you make of this report? I mean, it was in the Telegraph days, and I'm actually astonished by it.
I think people should be frightened,
yes.
Actually. And several former, now retired senior officers in the army wrote this letter to the Telegraph emphasising just how dangerous this is, particularly because intelligence officers, they have the access to the highest levels of secret assets. And if we're talking about lowering the vetting barrier to try and hire more people for the armed forces from abroad, just so that we can fill a diversity quota. Now, they're operating at about, I think it's 14%, which isn't far off the percentage of ethnic minorities in the population at large. And of course, if you're focusing on equality, diversity and inclusion, rather than focusing on as the point they made, which is that there is only one purpose that the army should have, and that is to be an effective and efficient fighting force. And this is undermining that. And I think also what this suggests is a really, really deep-seated cultural problem within the armed forces, that not only are they being sort of transformed into being thought of or thinking of themselves almost as a civil service rather than a fighting force, but it's also so commercialised, this idea that you would have people who are not British citizens, and you can have people serving the armed forces who are from Commonwealth countries if they live here for 5 years. So there are certain sort of restrictions on that, but they're talking about even wanting to get rid of those residency requirements. So it's treating the armed forces as if it's just some kind of company, rather than trying to create a culture in society at large where people want to fight for their country, to defend their country. That's the solution to recruitment in the long term, not hiring people from abroad and treating the armed forces like a business. I think it's dangerous, profoundly dangerous.
Claire, just hire people that can defend us, basically.
Well, the other issue is here that it's the outsourcing of the recruitment.
Yes, there is an issue here.
Is an issue.
Yeah.
A massive issue. Because as soon as you enter into any form of public-private partnership like this, then you have profit in front of anything that you can do.
This is true.
And for me, that's absolutely wrong, as is focusing on diversity, equality and inclusion, instead of getting the right people for the job, regardless of their race, their ethnicity, any political convictions. Get the people out that want to fight for the country, that have got pride in their country. Get them out there, get them armed up, and let's go and do it.
Especially as last month, I mean, the head of the British Army warned that Britain must prepare for conflict as the pre-war.
We're talking about conscription, remember?
Yes.
I mean, this is just an absolute anathema. It really, truly is.
And old servicemen, by the way, the ones that we do most recruit, servicemen are told they must complete mandatory unconscious bias training.
Mm-hmm. What a waste of time and money. I'm sorry.
Well, exactly.
What unconscious bias do you need when you pick up a gun and you're actually fighting?
Discipline in the army is not just in our armed forces, but it's about actually suppressing instincts and so on. So the other thing about this is that, trust is so important.
Yes, between your camaraderie, between your
Are you going to
team.
trust someone standing shoulder to shoulder, entering into a dangerous and mortally threatening situation, shoulder to shoulder with somebody who's there from abroad who simply sees it as a job?
Yeah.
I think that, the idea that they're having to undergo things like unconscious bias training is just a mad waste of time and money.
It is.
But also the fact that they're talking about making the remembrance services agnostic,
Yes.
getting rid of Christian elements. It's a complete absurdity that the civic rituals in this country do have a Christian heritage. That is not incompatible with being a tolerant and inclusive country to privilege those Christian roots. In fact, if anything, it's those Christian roots that are responsible for how tolerant we are as a country.
This is the thing. I don't want people, they're trained to recognise microaggressions and warned not to misuse people's pronouns.
I'm sorry. In the
you're on the front line, okay?
Exactly.
Excuse me. You just
misgendered me.
I think this is, in terms of the culture of the armed forces as well, this completely undermines discipline because it's pushing people towards this more sort of individual,
laissez-faire narrative
outlook that's sort of emotionally incontinent, rather than creating the kind of stoicism and proper spirit of camaraderie that you need in the armed forces in order for them to be effective.
In every area of life, actually, to be honest with you. I
Yes.
think that sums it up, doesn't it?